Welcome everyone to today's Talking Circle. As a few people are signing on, thank you for joining us. Using the chat box in the online meeting, please take a minute and let us know your tribe or state and say hello. Also, please note that all audio lines are being muted. Also, you will find a poll. Please answer to the poll questions on your screen, and we will get started shortly. Welcome to today's Talking Circle. We're glad you are here. There are still a few people signing on, so thank you for joining us today. Using the chat box in the online meeting, please take a minute and let us know your tribe and state and say hello. Please note that all audio lines are being muted. Oh, and please use the chat feature at the bottom of your screen to communicate to me, the moderator, the panelists, and the group. During the webinar, you'll be able to see our moderator and panelists along presentation slides. We will start here shortly. Welcome to today's Talking Circle. As people are signing on, please use the chat box in the online meeting, and please take a minute to let us know your tribe or state and say hello. Also, please note that all audio lines are being muted. We will begin our talking circle. Sengitsamu uagandi navi yoa kawa agoyatun demu navi marikana kawa a Jamie Demu ne o okewingeimu. Good afternoon. Let me start by introducing myself. My name is Jamie Bird Galloway. I am a member of the Okewinge tribe in New Mexico. A few housekeeping items. During the webinar, you will be able to see our moderator and panelists along with the presentation slides. Oh, and please continue to use the chat feature at the bottom of your screen to communicate to me, the moderator, and the panelists and the group. Please note this session is being recorded. Live captioning is offered during this discussion. To enable it, select closed caption on the bottom of your screen. You will see the live captioning after selecting closed caption. Regarding audio, you are probably listening through your computer or laptop. There is also a phone number if you have any audio issues. This number and webinar ID are at the chat box if you need to find it during the discussion. As I mentioned, our format today is a discussion on the topic by a panel of individuals, followed by a Q&A with you. We will be discussing human trafficking in tribal communities. You may submit a question at any time during the discussion through the Q&A featured at the bottom of the page. Questions will be answered during the Q&A portion of the session. Following this webinar, we will email you handouts and a Q&A document with the information covered today. Before I turn it over to our speakers, please take a moment to respond to the poll on your screen if you haven't already done so. Thank you for responding to the poll. Human trafficking is a difficult and sensitive topic. If you need support or to talk with someone, please contact Strong Hearts Native Helpline. Strong Hearts Native Helpline is a culturally appropriate and anonymous helpline for Native Americans impacted by domestic, dating, and sexual violence. Their contact information is available on the screen, and we will also post their number in the chat for your reference during today's discussion. Now, I am pleased to turn the time over to Marcia Good, the Executive Director of the Presidential Task Force on Missing and Murdered American Indian and Alaska Natives, also known as Operation Lady Justice, for welcoming remarks.
Thank you so much. I'd like to thank everybody for joining us for today's webinar. We're excited to offer this first Talking Circle. Talking Circles are a new, no-cost webinar series bringing skilled practitioners together with registered participants to discuss topics related to human trafficking in tribal communities. The format is a moderator-run question and answer session to share experiences with human trafficking in tribal communities and ask your own questions. This Talking Circle series is sponsored by the Office for Victims of Crime Human Trafficking Capacity Building Center. A variety of topics related to human trafficking in tribal communities will be covered by the Talking Circles throughout the year. We hope that you will join us for these discussions. Now, on to today's topic. Human trafficking erodes personal dignity and destroys the human spirit. A heinous crime involving force, fraud, or coercion to compel a person to perform labor, services, or commercial sex. Human trafficking affects American Indians and Alaska Natives. In my role with the Task Force on Missing and Murdered American Indians and Alaska Natives, known as Operation Lady Justice, we are working to enhance the operation of the criminal justice system to better protect American Indians and Alaska Natives who go missing or are murdered. Today, our panelists will share their experiences and discuss risk factors for human trafficking, barriers to addressing trafficking on tribal lands, and support and resources that are available to the American Indian and Alaska Native communities. I'd now like to turn it over to our moderator, Desiree Coyote. Desiree is a victim services advocate for American Indian and Alaska Native people. She is an enrolled member of the Confederated Tribes of the Umatilla Indian Reservation from her mother's side and is Nez Perce on her father's side. Ms. Coyote is also a member of the Field Advisory Committee for the Human Trafficking Capacity Building Center. Ms. Coyote, the time is yours to offer a prayer to set the intentions for this discussion and then to introduce the panelists and begin the conversation.
Thank you, Marcia. I'm pleased to be here today for the first Talking Circle and the discussion around human trafficking in tribal communities. This topic, as you know, requires meaningful attention by all who do this work, including those of you who are joining us today. Please, let's take a moment to center ourselves through prayer. Grandmother, grandfather, Creator, thank you for the opportunity to gather and share our life experiences. And we do this with an open heart and an open mind. First Nations have a long-standing agreement to care for the land and its inhabitants. And the land agreed to care for all that is living. Today is an opportunity for us to live up to our agreement, our promise. As we move through this talking circle, let us be intentional about our aura, our energies, and our hearts. When serving our relations that have been trafficked, we will be mindful and respectful of their lived experiences. A sovereign nation's existence is in its sovereign individuals, both now and for generations to come. Grandmother, grandfather, creator, thank you for your continued guidance. I thank you. Human trafficking is defined as the recruitment, harboring, transporting, provision, obtaining, and patronizing, or soliciting of a person for the purposes of labor, services, or commercial sex act through the use or force, fraud, or coercion, or involves a minor under the age of 18 in a commercial sex act. While trafficking may involve people of any age, race, ethnic group, or nationality, Native people have been found to be at particularly high risk. Traffickers prey on vulnerabilities such as jurisdiction, prosecution, and limited resources. During this conversation, we will discuss risk factors for trafficking, as well as barriers to addressing trafficking on tribal lands. We will talk about needed services to aid the spiritual, mental, physical, and emotional well-being of the trafficked tribal members or relatives. And while every victim's experience is different and the recovery and healing process is unique, trauma occurs and needs to be addressed to help the individual and our community to heal. Let's get started. Joining me today are three excellent panelists. Ingrid Cumberledge is an educator and tribal leader with over 30 years supporting her Native community in Alaska. Prior to joining the U.S. Attorney's Office, Ms. Cumberledge served as tribal judge, chief judge engaged in various cases, including primarily child protection and protection order cases. Ingrid is a skilled trainer and also served as a teacher and principal of the Aleutians East Borough School District. Ingrid is a commercial fisherman of 30 years plus and a mom of two amazing boys. Welcome, Ingrid. Taisha Wood is a member of the Navajo Nation and a project coordinator with the Amber Alert in Indian Country Initiative. She is a former police detective with 17 years of law enforcement experience with tribal nations in Arizona, working primarily as a detective in the areas of sex crimes and crimes against children. Taisha is a mother of two and a wife to a fireman. She currently resides on her husband's land in the Salt River Pima Maricopa Indian community. Welcome, Taisha. And Jolene Engelken. Jolene works with the Minnesota Indian Women's Sexual Assault Coalition and is a White Earth descendant. Building on years working in rural communities focusing on sexual violence, she has been doing national training and technical assistance for the last 6 years. Jolene works with urban Indian communities to assist them with setting up sustainable and effective services for victims of sex trafficking. Outside of work, Jolene likes to go hiking and travel with her daughter. Welcome, Jolene. To start our discussion, I'd like to ask our panelists a few questions. At this time, as we're going through our discussions, participants, please, as questions come to you, enter them in the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. Jolene, as a victim service provider, What are signs a relative or community member may be a victim of human trafficking?
Ooh, bonjour, hello everyone. I'm so thankful to be here with all the other folks on the call today, and with all 401 of you who are participating. Having the first question can be really hard to answer, but especially because identifying signs or red flags of trafficking isn't as simple as people think. For the communities that I work with, as they're setting up services for survivors, they're often like, we know trafficking is happening, but how can we identify people? Due to their settings in medical centers or treatment facilities, a lot of this is done through formal screenings, which can be really helpful, though they've all had to work hard at using language that connects more with tribal folk. You aren't asking, have you engaged in a sexual act by force, fraud, or coercion? You're asking, hey, have you ever done something sexual you didn't want to do so that somebody else could maybe, get drugs or money? Not the best example, but like simplifying language and making things more relatable is so important. Even with all these screening tools and all these amazing lists that exist out there, it can still be complicated to identify people. A lot of trafficking victims will not identify themselves as victims of trafficking. That's just not language that we use. It'd be much easier if that happened more often, but this work isn't always easy. I also think that one of the things that we need to think about is how people sometimes conceptualize trafficking as just one thing. They think about it, as, a stranger abduction in a white van, or they think about it as some sort of like shady massage parlor, or they're thinking that you're just going to see somebody who's always flinching with bruises and branding, which can happen. And all of this does happen. At the same time, there's so many ways that sex trafficking can really like manifest that doesn't seem like that. And it's not as clear cut. And some of that is honestly because from the outside, it can appear difficult to tell whether or not something is domestic violence or if it's trafficking due to an overlap in how those things can appear. For example, somebody controlling somebody else's paperwork or, a person not being seen alone very often can be signs of either trafficking or DV. Also, life is really messy, and especially like in our tribal communities, it can get really messy. And many people being trafficked have things that make them vulnerable, such as, addiction or being unhoused or past trauma. And in so many situations, things can quickly switch from being like consensual to being, something that they don't want. Maybe somebody is okay with sleeping with somebody in exchange for gifts, but then, it turned out that her boyfriend started giving her to his friends to, pay off debts. And now, she's too scared to say no. And this is sometimes how it comes out in our communities. And sometimes the signs and red flags can make it hard to tell if somebody's even being trafficked, such as, those people who are being moved around in some sort of trafficking circuit may be gone for a long time often. And so you don't even really know how to worry about them. Things can also appear really differently depending on the age of the victim. How trafficking is going to look for a two-spirit victim is going to be like a two-spirit teen is going to be very different than a 30-year-old woman, than how it might look for an elder who is being abused by their caregiver. For a teen, unexpectedly having a lot of money or a new phone or, hanging out with much older people, those could be big red flags. For an adult, maybe it's frequenting hotels or powwows or events they wouldn't normally, be at. That might be a sign. For elders, seeing unknown people in their house more frequently, having like a new like sexually transmitted infection or less money than you think they should have, those could be warning signs that something's going on, maybe including trafficking. So what I think is, learn the list, learn all of that, but even more importantly is trusting your intuition. Especially in small tribal communities, we know each other. We have gut feelings that something isn't feeling right. It might be trafficking, it might not be, but you simply have to be a good relative and create a space where people can feel safe. Things might come out in bits and pieces over time, but providing a place of disclosure can happen, and someone can trust that you will be there to support them no matter what. And I used to do a lot of work with sexual assault response teams, and I saw a fair amount of systems people on the list as they're chatting in. And it's the same thing like with that sort of response, like regardless of who that initial point of disclosure is, no matter who that is, that first person they meet, it has to be that same sort of reaction where it's comforting, it's welcoming, and people can trust that you're going to take that information and do with it what you can. But with our neighbors, our relatives, our community, as providers, we have to both know, the full realities of sex trafficking or human trafficking, including all these signs and how that relates to the messiness of life, as well as, really just being there for people in a human way. So Desiree, that's my answer, not answer.
I appreciate your candid information. I know locally we often have to take a look at how our systems respond, and many times it really is about educating our systems. So I wanted to ask you, Taisha, when you began this work as a law enforcement officer, how did that language look to you when you first started doing these types of pieces?
Well, 17 years ago when I began my career, we didn't talk about these types of things. It was, I'm not saying it didn't happen. Even now, it appearing on the surface isn't always so noticeable, which is why we need to have these discussions, as Jolene said, you know, bringing it back into the community and having these awareness projects and discussions within our family and the community.
Thank you, Taisha. And we're actually just going to continue with your question. So what types of services do victims of human trafficking need to aid in their spiritual, mental, physical, and emotional well-being?
That's a very good question, Desiree. Thank you for asking. From my experience in law enforcement, support. Support is the most important element that a victim can have. And it's that family support initially, right? That support and how you respond will pave the way for healing for that victim. Now think about it. When someone comes to you and tells you, I believe I'm a victim of human trafficking, or I think something is wrong in my relationship, and it's as Jolene mentions, you have that feeling that, okay, there's something's wrong, and it comes out and it's human trafficking. How do you respond? How do you respond as a parent? How do you respond as a grandparent? How do you respond as a teacher? How do you respond as the store clerk around the corner? You know what, when these person, you don't even have to know the person, but even if you do know the person and it's a relative or it's a best friend, your response empowers that victim to move forward on their journey to healing in all those aspects, physical, mental, emotional. Now think about it. What are some good responses? Because quite frankly, you know, 17 years ago, if someone came up and told me, you know, I would have to really think about how to respond. But as a teacher, as a mother, as a sister, it's words as simple as, what can I do for you? How can I help you? Those are very powerful words, which again could empower that victim to continue on the path for healing, but also could empower that victim to seek law enforcement help. Now, that goes back to my experience in law enforcement. When dealing with victims, I was very fortunate to work in a tribal community that had a family advocacy center. So when I would respond to a call of this nature, I would let our victim services unit know. And as a team, we worked together to provide a support system for our victims. We had confidential interview rooms. We had the victim services unit were able to provide cultural considerations. It could be burning cedar, it could be smudging, it could be traditional tea being available if that victim was willing. It could be just a traditional blanket there. These are things that you don't see in the city, obviously, but it doesn't say it can't happen there. You know, this is where our cultural teachings, and it doesn't have to be specific for that tribe. I know a lot of communities share simple things like smudging. So it's across the country. It's what you can make better for your community. Jolene, my friend Jolene, do you have anything else to add to this, or Ingrid?
Yeah, sure. And so what's fun is that, you know, I'm actually, you know, working mostly with urban Indian communities right now. So we are trying to bring that into the city, whatever size city that might be, is to really have all those cultural elements like really embedded within all service provision. But what I think is really important is to have options. I think that so often we want to have these, like, we want to have some sort of like menu of services. So we can do this, we can do that, we can do this, which is wonderful. But at the same point, like, you know, in doing advocacy, it used to be some people will be like, you know what, I just need a new lock for my door. That is all that I need. And so we're really meeting people with whatever they need, and trying to provide that holistic kind of support within the grantees that I work with. We have them fill out, you know, comprehensive service plan. And so they're having to figure out, you know, where can you get dental? Where can you have mental health services? Where can you have cultural components? Where can you have all of these other things that they might need, including, you know, literacy help or, you know, job coaching, things like that. But at the same point, they're not having to offer all of that, you know, as their own program. They're having to work and be in connection and be in community with other service providers and other folks in their local community, and then maybe broader, because not everyone's going to be able to have all of these things, you know, in their tiny little community. I grew up in a town of 200 people. Like, we didn't have access to all these things, but we have access to knowing where you can connect and where you can really build those bridges and really connect people. So.
Yeah, and I'd like to add that there are a lot of resources in our communities. In our Alaska villages, we all have our clinics, and often they have behavioral health support or medical support. And we're working with the Alaska Tribal Health Consortium to help build understanding of what those trafficking questions are and those trafficking things are. We have safe shelters that have that language. I'm just in the middle of our pilot project for community response plans to missing and murdered, and I really just did not anticipate that it was going to be such a big part of the conversation. But human trafficking has been a part of the conversation in each of our tribes, and a big part of the conversation. So just being aware that there are some resources that already exist out there, and they're culturally based in a lot of cases. And in addition to that, there are some other sources like we have Priceless Alaska, who's doing something as simple as mentoring. When somebody identifies as wanting to get out of this life, they assign 2 mentors to go and be with that person and be support to that person 24/7. And they just are there for them. And I think that's a big part of it, both family and tribe and health and other agencies in the community, finding somebody that can be there as these people want to make transitions out of this lifestyle, and in responding to trying to reduce our involvement in this lifestyle.
Excellent discussion, excellent panel. The one piece I do want to add in regards to this conversation, I do have one question I wanted to bring up from the queue, but my piece is when we're considering the cultural aspects, the ceremony pieces, especially if they're going to get into tribal ceremonies or sweat, that as advocates, as we advocate on behalf of the people who are seeking our services, that we carefully vet who we are referring the people to, so that we don't end up having somebody who's a known alcoholic or drug user as being the person who runs the sweat or provides the ceremonies, etc. So a question from the queue. This is for all y'all. How would you suggest advocates locate culturally specific resources that people are not currently aware of?
I was waiting for somebody to talk. Some of the tribes that I've worked with, they were beginning this. They were trying to put protocols, policies down in terms of tribal outreach. It's a slow process, but I know there have been other tribes that have been able to actually start on coloring books that were specific for victims, or and how to talk to children about human trafficking. These projects are in the works. I know Department of Health and Human Services has been working on a human trafficking assessment, I believe. And I could provide this information to Desiree or to the Jamie on the website for this specific tool that I'm talking about. And I'm sorry, I can't remember the name of it, but there's also the Blue Campaign, which was I can't remember the name of it. I'm so sorry, but it was geared towards Native Americans and their outreach and how to educate these about human trafficking within their tribal communities. And it was meant for everybody, not just one certain area. It was meant for everybody. Is there anybody else that wants to add anything?
I'll jump in. I think that it's honestly one of the worst feelings. And I mean, I know that I've planned events back in the day, and I thought I knew the community, you know, I was getting, you know, like a referral for a spiritual leader from somebody, you know, who I trusted. And we show up and all of a sudden we find out that that person is somebody's abuser. And it is a heartbreaking thing and not knowing what to do all the time, especially because I was just like a baby advocate at that point. And now, like, one thing I'm really happy about, like with my own workplace at MUSAC, is that like we have a policy for how to handle that. And I think that more people need to be talking about that. Like, what is our policy and procedure when somebody comes forward with that information? I think that's one way that people can start. I also think that in terms of identifying is maybe connecting to, do you have a tribal coalition? I know that not all states happen to have, you know, a tribal sexual assault coalition or domestic violence coalition, but a lot do. And they might be able to connect you with people who you might not know about, who might be from, you know, a neighboring res or something like that, who might be able to kind of help and come in and provide some of those services. And just really have that connection. I'm working right now, you know, with a bunch of communities across the country. And because they're urban hubs, they're having to deal with people from all sorts of, you know, they're from near and far, and you're having to deal with all these different like ceremonies and intertribal, you know, communication and things like that. And I think when it comes down to it is you try your best and you offer, you know, support as best as you can. And sometimes, like, I mean, there's such an amalgamation right now. I mean, in Minnesota, like between, you know, what's happening, like what's Anishinaabe and what's, you know, Dakota, and how these different ceremonies are really just being kind of intertwined sometimes. And I think that it's just finding somebody, putting it out there into the universe, and hopefully things appear. That sounded way too floaty. I'm so sorry.
No. Very good responses all the way around. It is a big discussion. I do want to address one more question from the queue before we go on to the next standard question, and that's, for areas without large Native communities, where can we source some of those cultural comfort items? So where can we source some of those cultural comfort items?
So I'll add, if you guys all want to take a trip to my house, we can go picking for wild tea. You are all invited. All those in the cities, come on down to Arizona. It's good weather right now. Actually, this is a good question, because I was relocated to Annapolis about 2 years ago, and I was looking for some, we call it Navajo tea. And there are actually some people on Etsy that sell these different types of products: sage, cedar, blue corn. But a lot of, it doesn't hurt to ask. You know, we in Indian country, we're all family. And I'm sure there's some people, if you put it out on chat and say, you know, where can I get some stuff that would be significant? Sage, cedar, ask. We're family, because we know this is going for a good purpose, right? We know it's for healing. We know, and we understand. And all that we ask, I think, is just that it be respected. You know, if we give you something, it's something from the earth. It's something we believe in. So respect, you know, what we give you. And it's basically, it's our duty to provide this type of healing to you as family, as relations. And this is what it's about. And I thank you for that question. For those of you that are asking from the cities, where do we get that? We'll help you find that answer. So do you guys have anything in your backyard, Ingrid, you want to share?
Oh, I think all of our communities are interconnected, and so family, I would say, reach out to family. They're good sources for all of that good stuff, and then lots of agencies. We have lots of agencies that are spread throughout the state here, and I'm assuming throughout different places throughout the United States, where you can go and say, hey, this is a desire. I'd really like to get more connected to my culture, and I'd like to have more of those culture comfort things. And And I also would just want to learn more about it. So I think those are good opportunities. In Alaska, that would be our associations, our health and social service associations, as well as several other agencies that would provide that source and help.
I'd also like to say, so I know that there's a big, not controversy, but there's a big, people have strong feelings about whether or not you should be buying, ceremonial things online or from other people, like whether or not you should be selling it, because we often do just do this gifting, like right before this call, I smudged with some sage that came from Pine River that actually came from my coworker who lives in Pennsylvania, so like that's how we normally kind of get things if we can't source it ourselves. But I also know that there are people who it's like, for whatever reason, they don't feel that they can do that. And so if you feel ethical in purchasing things, which I'm not saying to do or to not do, making sure that you're sourcing it from actual traditional folk and not just grabbing. I know that there's a huge like smudge kits from, non-Indigenous communities are things that I would not recommend buying. So.
Thank you very much for your responses. Participants, thank you very much for the questions coming in the queue. Continue to do that. We will not be able to respond to all of them on this call, but you will end up at the end having a listing of those questions along with responses. So I'm going to get back to a question for Ingrid. Ingrid, how do you start a conversation with stakeholders and providers around human trafficking awareness and messaging?
Well, addressing human trafficking means knowing that you're going down a long, dark, and bumpy road. Take one step at a time. In other words, just take action. I started this job in July of 2020. I'm the Missing and Murdered Indigenous Person Coordinator, a contractor for DOJ, in the United States Attorney's Office. And coming into that position, I had really not had a lot of experience with human trafficking, and the experience I had didn't realize fell under that heading. So I didn't realize that was even the language. And within my first week, one of the assistant U.S. attorneys stopped in and said, "Hey, this is something where we're going to overlap, and you need to know about this." And he explained the role of the office in prosecuting and a little bit of the language and what it looked like in the state of Alaska, and who the players were. A little bit later, one of my victim services officers said, "There's a training going on in a neighboring community. It's happening tonight. You might want to check it out." And so I did. I drove out an hour and participated in a training and realized that our law enforcement here in the state of Alaska was pretty involved. And they were doing things like getting involved at the airport and talking to people and seeing, what if they were at risk. And that we did have people that were being trafficked both in the state of Alaska and outside of the state of Alaska. So get to learn some of the language, begin to identify what the problem is, identify who your players and stakeholders are, and go to work. I began by bringing people together in many ways and making prevention my first focus. And that focus has grown quite a bit since then. But we brought people together in a working group. Law enforcement, victims, and advocacy providers and tribal representatives meet bi-weekly now and have been doing so since September. We reached out to our health consortium that works across the state to do some education and outreach. And we also reached out to help get our providers trained so they could recognize signs and have conversations with kids that they're meeting for athletic exams every year, just to make them aware of some things. In the process, we identified some providers. I mentioned Priceless earlier. They're a faith-based provider, and they provide training for health and medical providers, but they also provide that mentorship program. And so finding those great resources along the way is one of the ways that I think that you get involved, but reaching out and finding who's doing things already. In law enforcement, I found out that there was a really small group that was involved in it, but they all interacted with each other and determined who had the best jurisdiction for whichever case was going on at the time. And they had just recently started task force, and we got involved in that discussion. And then finally, as a part of my project, we're reaching out to tribes individually, and they've identified, every single one of them has identified human trafficking as a big concern. And so getting to know those concerns and seeing how you can get them connected with the resources to support your efforts. Thank you. Kagasikun.
Thank you, Ingrid. So this next question will be our last pre-drafted question. Participants, please continue to put your questions in the Q&A feature down below. So this last question is for Taisha. Native lands have unique jurisdictional issues. In your work as detective, how did jurisdiction impact the response to human trafficking?
Desiree, this is a very good question. And we could sit here all day and talk about jurisdictional issues in tribal lands and Indian country. There are some people that get degrees by studying tribal law, right? I can't offer you any certification in what I'm about to say, but I'm going to speak from my experience. As mentioned, I was a police detective. I worked in Indian country for 17 years, and that was within the state of Arizona. I work with the tribes here. So let me give you an example. My first human trafficking case happened about 5 years ago, and it involved a minor who was being auctioned off of Facebook Live in exchange for drugs. Okay, so I have a minor, a female minor, and I have a suspect. So both resided within a tribal community that I worked for. And the incident occurred within the boundaries of the tribal community. Should this case have continued and been prosecuted, I would have been able to apply tribal criminal charges, codes, and federal criminal codes for prosecution. Unfortunately, things didn't go well with my case, and there was no prosecution. That's a whole nother story for a whole nother day. But I knew how to proceed with the case because most of law enforcement, we understand the jurisdictional issues. We know what we have can try, and that depends on whether a victim and a suspect is Indian and non-Indian. So I'm using the term Indian. I know some of us Native Americans don't like to use the term Indian. But in law enforcement, because of the criminal codes, because of the way statutes are written, the term we are identified still as Indian. So I have to use that whenever we discuss prosecutor merit or tribal charges. So being that my victim and my suspect were both Indian, I could have went with tribal and federal charges. This is, again, for Arizona. This is not a public law 280 state. As I mentioned, we can go on and on about the different types of jurisdictional issues that involved. And as a tribal police officer for Arizona, I was certified in tribal, state, and federal jurisdictions, meaning I could try a case in any of those courts. Again, specific to Arizona. This is not the case for all of Indian country. We have 574 federally recognized tribes. Each tribe has their own sovereignty. Each tribe has their own jurisdiction in terms of criminal codes. My friends here, Jolene and Ingrid, are familiar with jurisdictional issues within their states because their states are, one is a PL 280 state and the other works a lot with the PL 280 state. So I'm going to have them chime in on how to answer jurisdictional issues in Indian country.
I'll take that first. Alaska is a PL 280 state, and we have numerous states that are PL 280 and also mixed jurisdictions that are going on with neighboring states as well. But in the PL 280 state, we do not have criminal jurisdiction. Tribes do have civil jurisdiction, and they do lots of work around with civil jurisdiction. But really, the state police have the primary jurisdiction. And so our tribes are working with our state police. Occasionally, they are working with our municipal police. And I just reached out and asked this question just to clarify in my own mind about how we decide who gets jurisdiction. And again, it's pretty muddy. It's a task force of people and a small group of people that are working on human trafficking. And they get together and they say, hey, this is what we've been doing. This is what's going on in the case. who's done the most work on it, who's best suited to take it. And so the Alaska State Troopers are working with our FBI, who are working with our U.S. prosecutors and the Alaska State Department of Law. And a lot of it is moving towards the federal end right now, but the state is really setting themselves up to take more of it. That said, when a tribe reaches out, they're dialing 911 and they're getting the Alaska State Troopers primarily, unless they're in the urban center. And then in the urban center, they're getting their police departments. So that's where it starts. That's how you reach out and get involved with the judicial system. And then it goes out from there. Jolene, any thoughts?
Yeah, I feel that we could talk forever about various things. And, Minnesota, we are a PL 280 state, but we have one tribe that retroceded and one tribe that never was a part, all those sorts of things. But at the same point, just to bring it back to the heart, is that I think that in addition to like the jurisdictional side of things with, prosecution and law enforcement, we're also having to think about how are survivors having continuity in care, almost, if that's the right term. But like, are you connecting with community-based advocates so that regardless of which system they're getting bounced around to, regardless of which, victim, I've seen people get bounced from like different victim services if their case is being transferred from, like local to federal and all this sort of stuff, that if there's a community-based advocate that could be available to have somebody with there from, start to end, and to be able to have somebody be that voice and be that support throughout the whole process, to be like, even if this is confusing, even with all these jurisdictional things, it doesn't matter. And we are still here to support you and to really provide you that care. I think that's the other part that kind of comes with it, is that in this like jumble of chaos that can be tribal jurisdiction, like we have to always at the heart of it think about like, how are we making this easiest for victim survivors, and how are they still having ready communication, and so they're not getting dropped or feeling that they're being dropped from a system. And so really making sure that that part is really attuned to as well.
And I want to add to that, just because that conversation is really just starting in Alaska. As victim service providers who are on the line from Alaska, I noticed that we have Bethel and Sitka, and in my old neighborhood with the Aleutian Pribilof Island Association, and I'm sure there are others that have joined since I last looked at it. But we're just starting this conversation, and part of the conversation is getting training so that you can support our families and victims as we get involved with these cases. But not only that you can support law enforcement as they're trying to proceed with that, because the reality is there has not been a lot of victim services on the ground. Our Alaska State Troopers victim services is extremely limited, and it's not until we get our federal partners involved that we're seeing victim services in some cases. And so that limits it to just those federal cases where they're getting any victim services at all. And knowing that there are other people out here doing the work. Victims for Justice is an organization that's providing a lot of that work. So looking for those other sources that are doing that. But as we start to have this discussion, thinking about what you need for training to support you, and making sure that we start pursuing that training to make it happen. So you can coordinate both with families, victim services, victim services, and supporting law enforcement as they do their job and pursue prosecution. Taisha?
Well, and there are so many variables when it comes to jurisdictional issues. Having to know the victim, who the victim is, who the offender is, but also where the crime occurred. But a part of that is also really having to understand how the partnerships between the tribal law enforcement, the city law enforcement, sheriffs, state, but not just that arena. We're talking, if it's with children, then Child Protection Services or tribal courts, state courts, federal courts, and definitely for advocacy, for community-based advocacy, to be able to have those strong partnerships on and off the reservation and at the federal level. So there are many moving parts when it comes to jurisdiction. They're not providing services, from direct services to actually finally getting it into court. I do want to pull up one question from the queue, as I think so the question is, could you recommend strategies for non-Native police officers to establish the trust of Native victims of human trafficking? One more time. Could you recommend strategies for non-Native police officers to establish the trust of Native victims of human trafficking? Anyone on the panel?
I'll go ahead and start. I'll get the conversation going here. That was a very good question. Being in law enforcement again, I think I want to quickly point out that even as a Native American working in a tribal community, I've worked with my tribe, and I've also worked with a tribe that I was not enrolled in or I belonged to. Sometimes even as law enforcement, I was seen as an outsider. It didn't matter if I was from the community or married to someone from the community or, you know, belonged to a different community. I'm not always accepted, you know, and I appreciate those that want to learn more about the people they're working with, the tribal members they're working with, or the community they're working with. What we did in our tribe for those new officers, the rookies who had never worked with tribal nations before, we sat them through a cultural considerations course, and it took a while for us to develop this program. But really, before that, I would just have these conversations with tribal police, or not tribal police, but police officers working with tribal nations. You basically just have to understand that we have stories from the beginning of time. We have origin stories. We have kinship stories. We have taboos. We have jokes. We love to joke. Native Americans love to joke. We love to eat too. So if you work in a tribal community, work with community members, and they start picking on you and tease you, take that in, absorb it, because you're in. You know, that means you're one of the family if they can pick on you and make jokes. But also in terms of interviewing, our mindset works differently. Everything's not linear. And this is what I've learned from my experience. You know, you roll up on a call and it's a fight in progress, and the new officer wants to talk to the reporting party, which is the mom, and that, let's say it's two sisters fighting, okay? And the two sisters have been fighting, and the police officer wants to talk to mom, and he says, okay, can you tell me what happened here tonight? Well, mom's going to tell you what happened 6 months ago when one of the sisters brought home a new boyfriend. And she wants to start then because that's when it began for her, the issues with her kids. But the police officer will stand there and say, no, I want to know what happened tonight. I don't want to know what happened 6 months ago. I'm sorry, buddy, but it started 6 months ago. And you're going to have patience. You're going to have to deal with that story. And then again, once they see that you've developed this partnership where you're going to have patience and you're going to laugh because they're making fun of you. If they offer you food, take it. You don't have to eat it, but take it, because that's a good gesture. So if you don't have this dialogue with people in community, look for someone who's willing to help you out. There are people there who are willing to help you because they want to see those partnerships. And the only way to develop partnerships between community members and those that they're not familiar with is just to start talking. Ask those questions. If you want to, I actually knew a non-native who started learning the language. He would go to the language classes, and he was funny. He would roll up on scene and he would start talking, and the community members in their language, and they would be like, what? And everybody loved him for this. He was a really nice guy. But you know, if you're new to Indian country, learn a little bit more about the community. Learn about their history. If they like to dance in their traditional dance or those social dancing, learn how to chicken scratch, like where I'm from in the tribe, or my husband's from. They're big on chicken scratch dancing. You know, it's little things that you don't think it's not so much on the level, but you know, find out, you know, how to say, like in Navajo, a non-native, a white person is Bilagana. You know, learn terms like that where you can kind of develop a relationship. Like, yeah, I'm Bilagana, you know, but I work here and I love my job. That's my experience, and that's my opinion. It's just looking for someone who's going to answer those questions, who aren't offended. There may be some people that may be offended, but I enjoy answering these questions, and I enjoy talking about my culture and talking about my experiences within the community. So, you know, there are resources, there are people out there who are willing, especially if you're unmarried and looking for a partner, we'll help you out too. We'll find a partner for you. Joke. I'm just kidding. I'll let somebody else answer.
I want to say be there. I've done nothing but talk to across stakeholders for the last since September. We've been in meetings talking with each other, and I have to say, being willing to answer those hard questions. You know, when somebody comes to you and says, "Hey, I just don't think you guys have been here," you know, say, maybe you're right. Maybe we haven't been here, but I'm committed to being here, and I'm willing to be a part of this. And if it's not true, say, hey, we haven't been here, but you haven't seen. We've done A, B, C, D. You know that we're doing these things because a lot of times we're great at doing things, but we're not great at communicating what we're doing. So getting involved and letting them know what you're doing. And I have to say, I had just a really important example of this in one of the pilots recently, where a young person had gotten involved with human trafficking, had hurt themselves to try to get out of it, and an officer went the extra mile. I mean, really worked with the family to support getting services and to support keeping that young person involved with services when they would have been already exited by the normal timelines, and checked back and gave phone numbers so that the family could reach out and interact. So open those doors, continue the communication, be willing to answer the hard questions and participate. If you know, the other thing that I hear all the time as we've had this conversation is, we don't know you. You're not a part of the community. You're often on a schedule where you're 2 weeks on, you're 2 weeks off. How are we even ever going to get to know you? And the deal is, you know, when they're having coffee down in the Harbor House, you go have coffee down in the Harbor House. When they're meeting at the community meeting and they're having food, you go to the community meeting and have food. When there's an event, you participate, you become a part of the community, and you make sure that they see you, they know you, and they know that you'll be there, that you'll have their back for them. Those are the things that really make a difference in starting to build these relationships. And that's what you're doing. You're building relationships.
Jolene, did you want to add anything else?
I do, but I know we're coming on the end, and I think we might want to get to one more question. So I will.
Yes, you are correct. Good conversation. I love that question too. So, an interesting one. Jurisdiction is confusing. How do we support Indigenous people who have been transported cross borders, United States and Canada? What resources are available to them and their families? One more time. Jurisdiction is confusing. How do we support Indigenous people who have been transported across the border, United States and Canada? And what resources are available to them and their families?
I'm going to jump in by saying I really don't know that much right now about this. And I think that one of the hard things is that, like, if we're taking like that professional sort of lens, is that so much of our funding sometimes limits us in how we can have these connections. But on that like relative to relative level, like there's so many people out there who will be that constant advocate, who will be able to kind of help provide any kind of resources and connection that you might be able to have. But I'm actually kind of at a loss right now about what that best way is to really be supporting families and within this.
And I guess I would encourage tribes to reach out to the U.S. Attorney tribal liaisons. I think it's a good place to start. And I'm with Jolene. I just do not have enough information that I could support you. But I do know that the U.S. Attorney's Office deal with these sorts of issues, international issues, on a regular basis. So the tribal liaison is a good place to start.
I agree with both their answers. I was trying to I was trying to put it in perspective where I'm located in southern Arizona. So I was thinking about the international border that we have here with Mexico. And I was trying to think of programs that are currently, that I know will work with the same types of families. And just like Ingrid said, we had again, fortunate, we were able to work with the United States Attorney's Office quite a bit. And they have victim advocates through their program. And so they provide a lot of that resource for us. So I would just defer to Ingrid's response that there are some programs out there that exist. Unfortunately, I can't name any right now.
I totally agree. I've worked with 2 victims that came out of Canada, but they were specific to intimate partner violence, not human trafficking, and built a good relationship with their families and the domestic violence program in that area. So it's a new area for me. It sounds like it's new for everyone else. So I want to thank the panelists, Taisha, Jolene, Ingrid. Thank you very much for sharing your experience and providing meat to the bones of our work. Thank you to the participants for your time, questions, and heart that you put into the work. No doubt you've heard pieces that you can apply to your work today, and I'm sure there are other ideas or projects you're thinking about taking on after this discussion. I know a few are looking for contact information so that you can continue this work to grow or enhance your projects. All your questions will be answered and distributed in the Q&A document, along with a link to the recording of the session and some handouts. So back to you, Jamie.
Wow, thank you everyone. Thank you Desiree, Ingrid, and Taisha, and Jolene for today's session and sharing your experiences and perspectives. We will be following up with each of you through an email, attaching relevant resources, a document with summarizing the questions and answers from today, as Desiree mentioned, and information on the next talking circle. Just a reminder, if you need support or to talk to someone, please contact the Strong Hearts Native Helpline. Strong Hearts Native Helpline is a culturally appropriate and anonymous helpline for Native Americans impacted by domestic, dating, and sexual violence. If you are representing a tribe or victim service provider, I encourage you to contact the center to request assistance about starting or sustaining or growing your anti-trafficking work that you're doing. The center is a free service intended to provide immediate and sustainable benefits to tribal nations with minimal demands on your time. Before we close, I like to take a moment to pull up a closing poll on your screen. We would appreciate your response to the poll. As you are filling out the poll, we, as an Indigenous community, I want to thank you for joining us today for our first talking circle. And please keep in mind, we do have some upcoming talking circles to follow.